As with past forums of this type, most of the questions, which neither candidate has seen in advance, will be directed generally to both of you, and we will allow 2 minutes for responses. Follow-up questions or further discussion between the candidates will be allotted 1 minute of time, and if you wish to add something in a rebuttal or further explore a topic, just get my attention, raise your hand, get my attention, and we'll expand on that. We're not going to turn anyone's microphone off the moment our timer expires, but we do want to respect those time limits as much as possible so that we can cover as much ground as possible in the time that we have. So with that, let's begin. We'll start with opening remarks, and we'll begin with Mayor Murn.
Well, good evening. First, thank you to WFIN for hosting this evening's forum, allowing the citizens of Findlay to see their options for mayor. Serving as mayor since 2019 has been a great honor. Our community, like communities around the world, have faced significant challenges, but I believe we're in an extremely strong position. Under my leadership, the over 350 City of Findlay employees have ensured our city continues to provide exceptional service, investing in our infrastructure to ensure we have safe drinking water, a working sewer system, and investing and making sure we have exceptional safety services, and so much more. While in office, I've ensured these exceptional city services while also accomplishing so much more. Securing $30 million in flood mitigation funding, $30 million for the 9975 interchange just announced today, investing 20% of our annual income tax revenue towards capital improvement projects, making significant progress towards strategic planning, and continuing to support and equip our safety services through the strict center and body-worn cameras, ensuring that our safety services have the equipment and training they need to keep our community safe. Findlay is not the top-tier community it is today by accident. It has been because of the vision and leadership of our past leaders, that vision that they took action on. I'm proud to serve this community, to continue to elevate the city of Findlay, and I know that I am the right candidate to continue this work, to serve the citizens of Findlay. I appreciate your vote for me, Mayor Christina Murn, on or before May 2nd in the mayoral primary, because every day is a day to serve our community and make sure we continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Murn. Opening comments from Ms. Sadler.
I'd like to thank WFIN for hosting this event. I was asking one of the gentlemen that I just met, Mr. Heminger, if we would have had this before they planned the event, and he said no, so I'm especially thankful. I want to thank my family for being here. I want to thank, and most of all, I want to thank God for giving me the boldness and the strength to rise up in such a critical hour like this when time is of the essence. We're in a place in our nation, in our state, and even in our community where the people are crying out, and they need a strong leader, a different type of leadership that looks a little bit like me. I started out when we moved to Findlay 37 years ago. Our family lived over by the railroad tracks. We lived in the parsonage behind the Little White Church on Main Street. And I went to Washington School, where my dad now owns WTKC and has Church of the Living God there. I ended up here at actually now Marathon for Performing Arts, but it used to be Central Middle School, and then I graduated from Findlay High School. So Findlay is my heart and soul. I've grew up here. I actually live over on Defiance Avenue across the street from Swell Park. So when they're talking about the strategic plan and other plans, I'm right on the forefront of those flood lines. So I can understand a lot of the verbiage that they're saying, and I want to get in the fight, because there's a lot of decisions that they're making about our community where I live in the heart of, where I was raised in the heart of, that impacts even me as a taxpayer. So I'm here to make that difference, and I want to be the change that you want to see.
With that, we'll begin, and we'll start with Mayor Murn. You mentioned a number of the accomplishments of your current term in your opening statement. I'd ask that you expand a little bit in terms of your priorities in your next term, what your priorities would be in a next term if you were to win re-election.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, getting strategic planning wrapped up. We have been working on this for a very long time. We've been talking about it, and we've been seeking the input and gathering the information, and it's really time to move forward with releasing the framework and making sure that we have those parameters out there and that they are fully adopted. Additionally, continuing to complete some of the capital improvement projects that we've been working on and planning for many years. These projects take a lot of time, but I'm very excited that we've been able to get a lot of work done in preparation for these, whether they're the Greenway Trail Phase 2, which kicked off today, Greenway Trail 3, expanding that, but also continuing to invest in our water and sewer infrastructure, establishing additional areas for investment for economic development. We have been working to kind of position ourselves to establish this strong foundation, and we've been very fortunate that over the last couple of years we've been able to weather that storm and be able to make sure that we're in a position to move forward. So I think that, you know, continuing to, there's not any crazy change that needs to occur. It's building upon what we've been doing over the last decade and over the last 3 to 4 years to be able to now continue to just take us to that next level, which I think we're very well positioned to do. You know, we've talked a lot about community safety and equipping our police and law enforcement. You know, we're working very hard to continue to recruit and make sure that we're competitive. That's a struggle that communities across the country are facing. So looking at innovative ways to equip our police and law enforcement is critical. I think we're on the right path with the body-worn cameras and the dash cameras, but continuing to listen to our team members to make sure that we are providing those foundational services, and then that positions us to encourage and partner and establish those relationships, not with city government providing everything, but making sure we're creating the environment that other organizations can thrive and meet the needs of our community.
And Ms. Sadler, you spoke about your decision to seek the office of mayor and what you bring to the table in that position. Describe what would be your priorities for your administration should you win the office of mayor.
Well, I started with the Strategic Planning Committee last year, and I was on the front lines of taking the interviews and listening to the voices of the people that were telling us exactly what mattered to them, which is one of the reasons that I'm running this race. I was listening to opioid crisis, homelessness, affordable housing, illegal aliens, doing some shopping, bringing some stuff for the kids to do. Those are the things. Police response. That is the majority of the voices that I heard. So when I would go into the committees, I would look up at the board to see what they were writing, and for some reason it wasn't matching up to what I was listening to. I did the pop-up at our church, I did roundtables, and I volunteered for the roundtables at different places, and so I think I got a pretty clear voice of what the city of Findlay community really was saying, and it wasn't saying what the Strategic Planning Committee was saying, and so I have not agreed with the decisions that with the plans that they are laying, because to me it seems more like a buildup of a plan that was already in place, which I believe was a catalytic plan. And we spent a lot of money on this plan. We spent $125,000 for this consultation firm. We're over budget, and here we are basing the entire city of Findlay on a strategic plan, which was a roadmap for the next 10 years for the entire city of Findlay, when I believe there was only 1,000 people responded, which is not the voice of the city. I did read a newspaper article, I believe by Bruce Bogusky, that says the reason that people don't get involved is because the city's going to do whatever the city wants to do, and that is the problem. They're talking about organizations. In one of the city council meetings I attended, and they were talking about the strategic plan. They said, well, we want to get more voices from different organizations, but we don't want the churches to be involved. Well, I belong to a church. I work at a church. I was raised in a church. And I'm like, if we want the voice of all the people, then why single them out? I don't know. I started seeing a problem with the plan a long time ago.
Now, Ms. Sadler, we're actually going to begin with you on this first topic, and the mayor mentioned capital improvements. You have repeatedly railed against the city leveraging state and federal grant money for those capital improvements. Explain your opposition to using such grants.
Well, one of the biggest problems for me is as I started looking into this, I was actually doing world news, and then when I ran for State Central Committee last year, so then I started doing state news, and I always wondered how the World Economic Forum and all these things trickle down into local business, into our local government. And I would always ask that. I wonder what this looks like in our local government. When I ran for State Central Committee last year, I saw how it trickled down through the state. And while I was running for state central committee. At the same time, I was trying to get a seat on central committee, which my precinct is vacant, and I still do not have a seat. They refuse to give me one. So I saw a huge problem. I saw how I would attend the GOP meetings, I would attend the meetings, people know who I am, they know why I'm running, and no one is talking to me. To which I say, I must be a little dangerous. I don't know. Maybe they don't like change, which is the problem. When I look into the companies that they're using, these companies that they are using are globalist companies. Green New Deal, Build Back Better. That's what the U.S. Conference of Mayors is all about. You go in for training, and this is these are the programs you use. These are the companies you use. This is how you implement the plan. As I'm looking at the plan, I'm saying, whoa, that looks like the much bigger plan, and it's trickling down in through our local government, and it's very restrictive. This MetroNet that we're using, if you haven't read my page, has to do a lot to do with surveillance. People think that it's just about raining, and no, the future of these smart cities is not for the people. We're using she was talking about they are building the water system. I've asked about that. I've asked for the contracts. I want to read the contracts. I've read all the contracts. And I'm here to get to know exactly what Findlay's doing. I think they're just taking taxpayer funds. ARPA are taxpayer funds, and they're not asking us what they want to do with it. We're telling them at the Strategic Planning Committee what we'd like to see, but they're building Findlay bigger, better, stronger for whatever plan they already have in place.
Mayor Murn, getting back to the question of grant dollars, they do make up a large part of the city's projected revenue for capital improvement projects, specifically this year and over the next several years. What is your response to concerns over that strategy?
Yeah, so grant dollars at the state and federal level are really critical to bring back to our communities to be able to invest. Ms. Sadler is correct. There are tax dollars. We have all invested in those, and then we need to make sure that we're bringing them back and investing them into our community to build out the infrastructure. You know, whether we like it or not, and I think that there is, always changes to be made. I think that it's great for us to step out and ask questions and have transparency and be a part of that. I feel completely comfortable with that because there's nothing to hide in the city of Findlay. I understand that, and we've been able to provide a lot of information to Ms. Sadler. When we talk about investing those dollars, that's how we're able to get significant projects done, to be able to make our community competitive, to be able to position ourselves for the future, to be able to create an environment that our community is able to succeed. And so I know that, folks may not like that we have taxes, but that's the reality. You have to have money to be able to fund things. And so we need to do our best job to use those dollars wisely. And I think in the city of Findlay, we are doing that. Planning is a process. I am very confident that our team is looking for opportunities and listening to the people and making sure that we're making the best decisions for our community. We're here because we care about the community. I grew up here. I was in a house that, fortunately didn't get flooded in 2007, but we had to evacuate. I get the calls from people. When you are serving as mayor, I'm responding to the emails. I'm getting those responses. I'm hearing the concerns. And you know what? Communication can always improve. And that's something that we can continue to work on to help people understand what we are doing and why we are doing it. We actually recently added someone to our team to help with communication, among other things. And so I appreciate people asking the questions and being able to provide it. But I think grant dollars, bringing those here locally, like we did today with $30 million to get the interchange improved, to bring economic development, to create a more safe and efficient environment, is exactly what we should be doing.
Obviously, many of the capital improvements become necessary because of the city's growth, and competition for that growth continues to get tighter every year. We'll start with Mayor Murn on this question. What do you see as the key issues that the city must address over the next 4 years in order to maintain our high standard of economic development and job growth?
Yeah, so the issues that are really facing our community, I would love to say we're unique in our challenges because then they would be much easier to solve, but unfortunately they're the same challenges every other community across the country is facing. Affordable housing, which means housing at all various price points and all types, being able to create economic mobility among our residents, addressing the drug crisis and continuing to address mental health. those are challenging issues. And, you know, I think it's critical that we have organizations and programs like Celebrate Recovery and Likewise Academy and these different entities, because government can't do it and they shouldn't be doing it. We, again, create the environment for these organizations to meet the needs of the people. What we can do is create good infrastructure and a safe environment and support our law enforcement so that they can get the drugs off the street and that we can try to get people to the resources that they need. So affordable housing, the drug issues and mental health crisis, but also those key infrastructure, right? We got to have nice streets and easy access and clean up. You know, I would love if anybody has any bright ideas on how to work better with utilities that come in and do whatever they want. I'm all ears, because it drives me nuts when they come in and cut down trees and put up big posts. But planning out our utilities wise and continuing to seek those investments, but also making sure that we have capacity and are talking about the capital improvements to make sure that we are positioned when we have a company call us and say, we're looking at going here. Here's what we need to make that happen. We're positioned to be able to meet those needs. And if we can't meet those needs, we're able to communicate to them what we would need as a community to be able to accommodate them.
Ms. Adler, what do you see as the key issues the city must address in order to maintain economic development and job growth to the standard that we've become used to?
Can I get back to the question before that where she was talking about grant dollars? Because I was curious as to, I understand in building a city that we need grant funds, but there's a lot more money available that belongs to the taxpayers that we are using. So prior to the pandemic and the Build Back Better ARPA funds that are funding this city, how much money in grant funds did we get in order to pace the growth of the city? We're growing at such a rapid pace right now that the people are spinning their heads. Every meeting that I go to, people are saying, no, we're not good with the annexation. No, we're not good with the farm animals. No, we're not good. I hear people crying out all the time about the Y over here and how they're trying to tear down. They're trying to tear down historical homes while they're taking ARPA funds, our taxpayer dollars, to tear down neighborhoods. And you know what other communities are doing? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're taking the ARPA funds, our taxpayer dollars, and in Akron, they're actually giving grants for home repair programs to homeowners in the amount of $25,000 so they can fix their homes. Toledo, rooftop repairs programs. I mean, there's other ways to spend taxpayer dollars than building the city faster and stronger. We can slow down, make the process not so sterile and somewhat organic.
Mayor Murden, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I appreciate the programs, and I've been keeping my finger on the pulse for what other communities are doing. And there was two things. One, the specific items you mentioned, I agree, are great programs. We actually already offer those as a community through the CHIP program, which is administered, is an annual program that we receive funds through the state that goes to Hancock Regional Planning as well as Habitat for Humanity. So we're, again, partnering with an organization that is better equipped to meet those needs. Additionally, they're funds that we didn't want to start programs that were not going to be sustainable. I don't think it's wise to invest and stand up things that aren't going to have a kind of immediate benefit to the community. And so when we looked at how we spent those dollars, they're primarily going towards infrastructure. Water and sewer is one of our largest expense. It's also extremely critical. And it was an expense that we were already going to have to make. And as we look at our capital improvement needs over the next 10 years, was going to be a significant burden on the city. So we said we need to put dollars towards that to help offset the detriment to the community.
But aren't we going to keep asking for grants for all of this money for the CAMs? I mean, all the meetings that I've been to, every year we're going to have to keep asking for grants. Yet you just said that we don't want to start a program that we can't sustain, but we're starting things for the city that are not going to be sustainable. And when those grant dollars run out, who's going to be stuck with the bill?
One-time capital investments are different than programs.
We'll move on because one of the things, Ms. Adler, that you were just mentioning regarding historical preservation, and certainly with progress comes the question of preserving the city's past. Findlay is certainly fortunate to have some beautifully maintained historic homes. The Marathon Center for the Performing Arts that we are standing in this evening was built around the beloved historic Central Auditorium. However, we have lost some significant historical structures, such as the old Findlay Gouts building that was taken down for Marathon's expansion, and recently, as you mentioned, the YMCA has come under fire for plans to remove a number of homes in a historic neighborhood near downtown. It's been suggested that the city create a historic preservation ordinance to protect its legacy in this way. Again, Ms. Sadler, we'll start with you here. What are your thoughts on striking that balance between preserving the past and building for the future?
Well, I'm a voice for the people, so I would go to the people, and the people that are crying out right now in that area are the neighbors. If the neighbors are affected, I would listen to their voices before I spent grant dollars tearing down a neighborhood, tearing down their neighborhood.
Ms. Murden, your thoughts on striking that balance?
So creating good community policy is extremely difficult. We see it, at the local level, at the state and federal level, and very frequently you get caught up with titles rather than what the actual legislation says. When we're looking at developing good policy for the city of Findlay, I do think we should look at having some historical preservation guidelines, but I also think it needs to be start off small and then see how it works and make sure it's not inhibiting development as well. I think, it's nice to maintain and protect and have that character in communities, but I also think that having the private property and their citizens being able to have flexibility with their property is important as well. And so I think it's difficult, but I do think it's worthwhile. I've talked to Sarah Sisser from the Historical Museum, and I told her, put together some recommendations. Let's have the conversation, and then let's maybe look at the historical South End, meet with those neighborhoods. I would want them to bring it forward to say, yes, this is something we want to see, and then we could look to see if it makes sense elsewhere. But I think it's a delicate balance that has to be struck, and right now, I, again, would like to hear it come from the people and the experts in the room.
We're about halfway through our allotted time for this evening's forum. We're going to take a very quick commercial break on WFIN, and we'll be back with the second half of tonight's mayoral forum.
Your news authority is...
Forum is presented by Sink's Flower Shop and Greenhouse.
Welcome back to our candidate forum featuring the two individuals running in the Republican mayoral primary in the city of Findlay. Again, incumbent Christina Murn and challenger Haiti Sadler. During the first half of our conversation, I'll start with Ms. Adler on this one. You mentioned the strategic planning process a couple of times after Mayor Merton brought it up, and you mentioned that much of what is becoming part of the strategic plan, in your words, was not what the people want. Can you give some examples of that and expand on what you feel is not being heard by the people?
I actually have it written down, and well, I've written it several times over, and just what I said at the beginning. I heard voices of the people saying more shopping. You know, the thing about our community is that we have an industrial park, we have beautiful hospitals, we're a micropolitan city. I mean, it's a great community that we live in. I think what we're forgetting is the people. There is nowhere for these people that are spending their days in these manufacturing plants. They have to leave town just to go shopping. Our children, look at my family is filled with children, and we have to go to Toledo to go to an urban air, a sky zone. We want to build a beautiful community. We want to make it organic. We have to start with the people to make sure that they're happy here and staying here. You know, they're talking about, there's a conversation about how college students graduate and how we keep them in Findlay, keep the workforce. Well, if there's nothing for the workforce to do but go down into the Dora area and drink and eat, and there's no recreation for anybody, you know, in the middle class, I mean, I think that's a little bit of the problem, because it's the middle class that's working over there in the industrial park. I mean, we are the people. Right? So I think a happy people would make for a beautiful community, and that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Mayor Merton, let me ask you, I'll frame the question in this way. As Ms. Adler mentioned, and this is probably true of many surveys of this type, the surveys in the strategic planning process sometimes don't get as much engagement by community members as what you would like. What would be strategies to engage more individuals in these types of conversations?
You know, I would love to hear more feedback from the community and would have loved to have seen more engagement. And we put out, you know, newspaper ads, we held forums, we held online surveys, we engaged with all these different, groups. I do think that we missed the mark a little bit from the standpoint of we were so focused on this mentality of protecting the process from any single organization having undue influence, that we really tried to say we only want to hear directly from the people, especially, and I think that that is proper, the first round of engagement. However, when you have organizations that have specific expertise in an organizational body or memberships that can speak directly to some of the areas of concern and gather feedback, we probably should have engaged them sooner. So I would have loved to see additional feedback. We did then reach back out and start trying to garner more interest and engagement, but I would say the process is not at all over. We are continuing to seek feedback. The draft plan is out at findlayforwardplan.com. The committee has open emails, just as we have open phone lines and my office hours. You can call and schedule time anytime. So we are always seeking feedback. The meetings, strategic planning committee meetings are open. There is not an easy fix to getting people to engage in the process. I think it's, a societal issue of people, don't engage until they're upset by something, and then they show up and they're not really sure what they're upset about, or they're not able to kind of vocalize what changes they want to see. So it's a balance. I would, however, like to speak. I do think that the feedback overall has been very representative. If you go onto the website, you can see the data and see how it was culminated by our independent consulting firm that said, here were the percentage of feedback and comments that we received broken down by category. Now, I think that there was, I'm almost out of time. If I may just mention one other thing related to bringing in businesses. I would love to have a Sky Zone and a fully developed, Easton-like mall and additional, businesses. I am a citizen here. I grew up here. I want to shop here. I want to invest my dollars here. That's not how economic development works. Businesses decide where they are going. We reach out to these businesses all the time. There are ongoing conversations with lots of the big names. But ultimately, a business goes where they think there is a sustainable opportunity for them to make money. And we got to continue to grow our community so that it is viable when they look at us.
Yes.
I don't understand how we can be a top micropolitan, #1 micropolitan city with an industrial park, a top 100 hospital, a workforce like no other, and then we can't solicit businesses for the families. I mean,
e-commerce is the issue on why you can't sustain retail. It's been coming for 10 years, and it's much more challenging to have a sustainable retail environment when people can travel or order to their home.
Let's reset that to the 1 minute response time, because I want to ask Ms. Sadler to expand on clearly you feel that this is a priority item. What would you do differently, or what would you, how would you prioritize that in your administration, attracting those types of businesses?
Because I don't work for the city, but I'm doing a lot of research, and I just want to commit to the people that if you vote for me, I will be attending city council. I will be doing my research, and day one, I will go to work because I think this is very important for the people. That's how important it is. So because I don't understand the back end of it, e-commerce, like she says, I would really stop. I would pause on some of the big things that we're doing just to get the community to respond. I think that the community is very ready to respond, and like I mentioned before, there was an article in the paper that says the community doesn't respond because they feel that the city's going to do what they want to do anyway. And as I mentioned before, the strategic plan is the old catalytic plan. If you look that up, it's building from downtown to the University of Findlay. And you know what? While they're beautifying downtown, there's nothing to do on the east side of town. And we got these big 10, 20-foot poles that are tearing up the landscape over there while we're just putting in trees and medians over here downtown. I mean, there's more to Findlay. There's more to Findlay that I think we need to focus on.
Thank you. Let's move on to Findlay's participation in the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Ms. Sadler has questioned the value of this association. Mayor Murn, what do you view as the value of being part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and how do you handle those times when the organization's official position on an issue conflicts with your own?
Yeah, I think the U.S. Conference of Mayors has been a very valuable organization. It gives you an opportunity, just like in any other profession, to network, hear from your colleagues, understand what people are doing in their community to try to address an issue. It also is, discussions and forums and connections on lots of different issues that our community is facing. You know what? I disagree with them quite frequently, but that's completely fine. I think we should be engaging in organizations that have differing opinions than us, because if nobody shows up to the table to say, that's not right, and I have a different viewpoint, then people get into an echo chamber, and that's when even worse policy is created. So I think it's extremely critical, and as the Northwest membership chair for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I've been specifically trying to reach out to more Republicans and conservatives and independents to engage. When we look at this landscape of communities across the country, over 2/3 of them are led by Democrats. So obviously an organization made up of mayors of communities over 30,000 are going to have more Democratic-leaning individuals. But if we just put our heads in the sand and don't engage on topics that are facing our communities, how are problems really going to be solved? And an example is a couple of months ago, I was on a leadership meeting, and they were discussing, the migrant population coming over the border, and they were being bused to some of the communities, and they were talking about, well, we need the federal support, and we need to write a letter saying that we need them to do this, this, and this. And I said, listen, I support that, and that you said. I said, but I'm not signing off on a letter or giving it any endorsement unless you also say that border security is important. And so they added that to the letter and communication. And I think that that's something that they're all open to. But again, when you don't have somebody in the room that says, wait a second, we forgot something that's a critical piece that may not have been something they thought of, then bad policy is made.
Ms. Sadler, I'm assuming that if you were to become mayor, from the comments that you've had regarding the U.S. Conference of Mayors, that you would end that relationship with the
I would not
conference.
spend taxpayer funds on that program.
So
no.
The question then becomes, what alternatives, if any, would you seek for the benefits of that collaboration and that other voice in the room, as you mentioned that Mayor Murn outlined? Do you see some value in that, and would you seek out other alternatives?
Oh, sure. I'm part of several planning committees. I mean, I put on events, I throw my own parties, I do weddings, I do all kinds of stuff. Yes, let's bring everything to the table, and I agree. Brainstorming is a great thing. I don't agree with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. There's got to be other groups out there that can help create cities more organically, a little bit slower, that pay more attention to the people. And while we're talking about the U.S. Conference of Mayors, one of the biggest problems for me is everything at the U.S. Conference of Mayors is about build back better. Okay, that's just not a good agenda. It teaches people how to do that at a local level, which the programs that we're using, MetroNet, and I say it all the time, build smart 15-minute cities. Are we building a smart 15-minute city? I got the response, no. But, okay, so that's a globalist company. So is who have North America that we're doing our water systems from. They're a globalist company about the Green New Deal and about climate change and how to suppress and emissions, which is part of that whole farm animal thing of we want to make sure the air is good for everyone. I mean, you see it coming down into our local government, creating Alliance for a Sustainable Future. I think Findlay was doing very well without accepting all these funds and adding all this verbiage about a Green New Deal. I think we're fine. What does Green New Deal have anything to do with the air in Findlay? It teaches climate protection, police reform programs, which a lot of the things I don't disagree with. I disagree with the Biden agenda, and it feels like that's what we're following here in Findlay, because I voted for, I was a supporter of Christina. I have the mayor from your shirt. I voted for her, and then I see her policies, and I'm like, whoa, I'm the only one in the city of Findlay that stood up. We attend the same church. We're friends. We've been together. We've been on the worship team together. I've known her for over 20 years, and I'm the only one in the city that says, well, young lady, I think you're leading our city in the wrong direction. I'd like to take the city back, take the wheels and just start steering us in the right direction.
I want to talk a little bit about the issue of communication, and both of you have kind of danced around this a little bit in some of your responses. Ms. Sadler, I've read many of the posts on your social media page and the blog posts from your campaign website that include some thinly veiled accusations of a lack of transparency in local government, at times going so far as to imply that city leaders, including the mayor, have not always acted in the city's best interest. Can you cite a specific example of this?
Well, a couple of things. When we were talking about the historical museum over there, the YMCA tearing down those houses, Christina sits on the board of the YMCA and receiving ARPA funds, taxpayer dollars, to tear down these homes. And they did not make it public to the city. As a matter of fact, the residents around that area said that they were very sneaky about it. That's one thing. While we're fighting the opioid crisis, an ordinance 2023-2022, they're giving authorization for the mayor to enter an agreement for the national opioid settlement crisis. So I looked into what this is, and she was mentioning something about Johnson & Johnson. During that council meeting, one of the councilmen said, oh, you mentioned this national opioid settlement crisis. She's like, oh, I was going to talk about that. There was no information in the packet. I don't have the information. I don't know if it was put up. I think I printed the entire package. I would like to see what the national opioid settlement crisis is, because she mentions Johnson & Johnson. Well, let me back up a little bit. I started talking to Harm Reduction Ohio Harm Reduction. They engaged me in conversation, and they said with the national opioid settlement crisis that none of the funds goes to the families. And guess what? None of the ARPA funds are going to the families, to the community. They're not building programs and giving back to the community. They're not they're just building the city bigger, and the people are crying out like, slow down. Then I have to ask, if you're mentioning Johnson & Johnson through the national opioid settlement crisis, Johnson & Johnson is a pharmaceutical company. Is this like, who's receiving this money? Johnson & Johnson, pharmaceutical drugs, but the street drugs are different. So I'm confused as to how that's benefiting anyone while we're receiving more money.
Mayor Murn, you care to respond to the criticism of a lack of transparency?
Yeah, you know what? There's always room for improvement on communication. The city is not intentionally trying to hide anything, but we have hundreds of projects going on all the time. So we can work to continue to, put information out there. Again, I mentioned that we have a project manager in my office now that is helping with a lot of things, and one of the specific items is putting more information out on social media. People are extremely difficult to communicate with right now because people are decreasing their involvement with, news, media. They're getting their information on social media. And before we hired this individual, I'm the communications person. So I'm doing everything and trying to get information out on social media. So that is challenging. Oh, shoot. I would like to, if I may, address some of her comments related to specific things. So the opioid settlement is the state settlement that began, I believe, back in 2017 was the original time that the city of Findlay determined to engage. And what that is because of the opioid crisis, there is a lawsuit against pharmaceutical companies saying that you were pushing opioids and lying about their addictive tendencies. And so the state, the attorney general, took a stance and started suing those pharmaceutical companies saying you are liable. So what the city of Findlay did is, instead of trying to sue them on our own and racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, we said we will participate with the state. And then the state is negotiating on our behalf. And then there is a national opioid settlement going off against 7 or 8 different pharmaceutical companies. They're now also going over the retailers. And so the city of Findlay, what that specific legislation was doing, and the reason there wasn't a letter explaining it, was because I got it and they said, hey, we need signature in 30 days. Well, because we have our meetings every other Tuesday, it's 45 days. We need to get it on the agenda. And it was already past the deadline to get things on the agenda. And I wanted to make sure that it was on the agenda when it was sent out. So what we authorized there was saying, instead of having to come back every ordinance and naming the new company, that if the state of Ohio agrees to pursue them and they settle, the city of Findlay will automatically be included in the predetermined allocation of those funds that we will then utilize locally under the parameters to address the opioid situation here. So far to date, we have only received about $10,000, and we're working with Hancock County and some other agencies to determine the best use of those funds.
Let's talk a little bit more about the opioid crisis with respect to the fact that this continues to be a problem locally. As I'm sure that you're both aware, tomorrow Sheriff Heldman will be holding his annual opioid update, at which some very out-of-the-box thinking with respect to tackling the opioid problem will be presented. What more, and I'll start with Ms. Sadler, what more, if anything, can be done on the city level to address this issue that hasn't already been tried? What would you be willing to look at in terms of out-of-the-box thinking, if you will, to improve addressing this at the local level?
Again, there's a lot of things that I don't know. I don't know the inner workings of these things, but I tell you one problem that I do have that I will look into immediately. If we're doing public health, have an opioid crisis, I would definitely look into the syringe safety program, because, they take these words of ours and then they turn them into something they're not, because, well, for whatever reason. Last year in 2022, the Hancock Public Health handed out 70,787 needles to users. We have an opioid crisis, and the Hancock Public Health is handing out needles saying we don't want them to get a disease. And you only have to be 1,000 feet away before you even have to use the needle. That's less than a quarter mile, I believe. I mean, how far is that? Before somebody can shoot up right there on Melrose, on Bright Road, or driving home because they got needles from. So I don't know how it all works. I will look into the systems. I'm not completely on board with everything that the public health is doing, especially since they were the agency that was enforcing vaccines, pushing mask mandates. I'm for medical freedom as well, since I'm talking about it. I do plan on trying to sign legislation for the city of Findlay to protect us from that, because should this happen again, another pandemic, I just want to make sure that our community is covered in the way that we see fit based on our constitutional rights. So there are a lot of things that I'm looking into, a lot of things I have to learn, and that is what I'm definitely going to be diving into.
Mayor Murn, again, similar question with respect to the opioid issue. What would you be open to trying that hasn't already been tried?
Yeah, this is an extremely difficult challenge. We didn't get here overnight. Before I became mayor, I was working with Pain Management Group, a company that was focused on getting people off of opioids that had chronic pain. You know, we've seen a great shift in the opioids not being prescribed, but now we're seeing increases in meth and fentanyl. I would continue to advocate through state and federal organizations and direct conversations with our legislature to secure the border. We need to cut off supply. We're right on I-75, so that's going to be a big challenge. So we need to continue to work with our law enforcement. State Highway Patrol does a fantastic job of interdiction on the highway to pull people over, but we need to figure out how we make sure that those people are not staying in our community when they're released from jail. So some of our organizations like Welcome to a New Life and the City Mission are able to work with them to say, how do we get you back to a family environment? How do we get you mental health resources? I think we need to continue to work on mental health resources, and I would then completely prioritize our kids. Involvement in the Leader in Me program is awesome. It teaches emotional intelligence and builds character and builds good relationships. I think other organizations that, you know, continue to prioritize families and kids are extremely important, because that's how you help prevent people getting addicted to drugs. We need to continue to invest in our mental health resources. As we look at the continuum of services that is provided, the public health, Health and Human Resources, I believe is what we're calling it, I apologize. But our social workers and court staff are completely understaffed. So continuing to focus on how do we attract and retain that workforce, because if we don't have people available to counsel and intervene when somebody is ready to make that change, then you lose that opportunity, and typically they end up then having an emergency situation soon after because they feel hopeless. And so continuing to support the mental health and our treatment services, but also services like Celebrate Recovery and some of these addiction support groups that help prevent people from relapsing.
Before we move to closing statements, I do want to sort of end things on a lighter note with this final question, something of a personal question, and we'll start with Mayor Murn. What is the one thing that you enjoy most about being mayor of the city of Findlay?
I would say getting to interact with kids. So I was last week at Whittier talking to students about how they could be good citizens and good leaders, and being able to hear their ideas and opinions, and then all of their random questions about me and, you know, what's my favorite shape and color and day of the week and sports team, and then they argue with each other. Getting to see the future of our community. I love the variety of what I get to do on a daily basis, whether it's solving the problems, setting a strategy, working to hear from the public, getting to go out and represent our community around the world. I love serving the public and making a difference in the community that I know and love, but getting to engage with our kids is probably the best part. No offense to all of you here tonight. You guys are not quite as much fun.
And Ms. Sadler, similarly, what most excites you about the prospect of being mayor in the city of Findlay?
Well, I'm a people person, and I serve in the community, and I do a lot of community service. I do a lot of outreach, personal outreach to the elderly and things like that. And I look forward to doing that in a greater capacity for our community, meeting more people. I think that looks like fun. I mean, taking a day and spending it with the kids sounds like fun to me. I do that with my nieces and nephews throughout the summer, and that's what I'm looking forward to doing.
And with that, we will move to our closing statements, and we'll begin with Ms. Sadler.
I want to say thanks again, WFIN, for putting on this event. It's been great. As I see Findlay, in my humble opinion, I see Findlay as adopting radical ideas, being fiscally irresponsible, using companies and art to build our infrastructure that are globally minded, and use socialist verbiage. Companies like Metronet, Suez North America, and those are only two doing projects. There's 22 projects going on right now. The Build Back Better plan doesn't work for the taxpayers, and it only works for the stakeholders and private investors. I see Findlay and their process being rather sterile, and after looking at the Fourth Industrial Revolution on the U.S. Conference of Mayors, rather dystopian as well. So I do believe that they're building a faster, stronger city and not handling not handling the opioid crisis. And speaking of illegal aliens and shutting the border, we're not shutting our city border, and they're bordering on the edges, crowding the edges of the city and ramrodding things for that 30-day, 45-day city council, leaving the people out of say. If we're needing to identify a threat, I found it, an anti-American agenda. I'm here to help resolve the issues that led us here. I'm not here to be the intern. I'm actually here to to be the boss, but a boss who answers to the community. It's time for me to take over the wheels and steer the city in the right direction. I'll be restoring the confidence of our community in our local government. I want to bring higher paying jobs. I will be bringing higher paying jobs, shopping, recreational life for families in our community to enjoy. I will be putting Findlay families first. I will see that the funds we use in grants will contribute to small businesses. I think with innovation and creativity that we can take the infrastructure that we have now and we can build a city like no other. I think Findlay is a strong city. I think there's a lot of money here. I think there's a lot of strength here. I think there's a lot of potential here. I see the potential. I see the beauty in it. I see the people in it. I see it growing more organically than what it's growing now. And I'm here to be that agent of change.
Mayor Mern, closing thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you all for taking your time to come out this evening. This evening, you've had the opportunity to hear from two differing candidates for mayor. Nearly anyone can hold the title of mayor, but only the right person can truly lead a community, and I am that person. The city of Findlay is fortunate to have the strong foundation and be in the position to set a new trajectory for our future. To continue to excel as a community, we must be intentional and led by a leader who understands the city of Findlay operations, is able to partner with organizations throughout the community, and most importantly, brings people together. I am the candidate that has shown what we can do under the most challenging circumstances. I understand this community, I understand the people, and I am ready to continue to move this community forward, addressing whatever challenges may attempt to get in our way. I am once again asking for your support to trust me to lead the city of Findlay to ensure our future. Please vote Mayor Christina Mern on or before May 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight for our candidate forum. We'd also like to thank the candidates for taking part in this evening's forum and taking the time out of their day to join us. A reminder that the deadline to register to vote in the May primary is coming up April 3rd. Early and absentee voting begins April 4th. Election day itself is Tuesday, May 2nd. I'm Chris Oakes. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thanks for joining us for tonight's political forum presented by Sinks Flower Shop and Greenhouse. The preceding has been a special presentation from your news authority.